Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Blue Marble Science. Are you ready for some more of the worst explanation of how airplanes fly ever by Brian's logic? Welcome to part 2. Warning: severe facial and monitor damage alert is in effect. Get out those oven mitts. Push the monitors way back out of punching range. Let's light this dumpster fire and have some fun. Let's see where Brian left off.
The pilot must change and control the pitch angle in accordance with the airspeed. So when flying fast, the airplane must have its nose pushed down to stop the positive lift from creating an upward stall due to too great of a pitch angle upwards. And when flying slow, the pilot must keep a high pitch angle as there is less thrust being imparted, so raising the pitch angle will create positive lift and keep the airplane in the air. Moving fast creates lift, so less pitch angle is necessary. More important is the control of the lift when flying fast. But moving slow doesn't create as much lift, so a higher angle of attack is necessary. So the basic rule is more thrust, less pitch, and less thrust, more pitch. Okay.
Brian is still confused about the relationship between lift, weight, thrust, and drag. So let's see if we can help him out. Brian, you said more thrust, less pitch, less thrust, more pitch. Well, let's see how that works in an airplane that's climbing. If we start in level flight and increase the thrust, we now have more thrust than we have drag. We've got to add the aft component of weight to make up for the drag that's missing. And the only way we can do that is to change the pitch of the airplane. Now, the angle of attack hadn't changed. We're flying at a constant airspeed, but our pitch angle has increased. So in this case, more thrust, more pitch. What happens in a descent? At constant airspeed, when we take the thrust away, we still have drag, so we need a forward component of weight. The only way we get that is by reducing the angle of pitch. In this case, less thrust, less pitch. In level flight, if we want to maintain our altitude and we increase the thrust, we need to reduce the pitch and the angle of attack. This is going to cause the plane to fly faster. If we want to reduce the thrust, we have to get more lift by increasing the angle of attack. And that, of course, will slow the airplane down. Think about it this way. Pitch controls airspeed and power controls altitude. That's something you'll hear pretty much every pilot say.
Second now. Okay, so this is a basic indicator. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger now. So this is a basic indicator. This is not just pitch though. There is an angle of attack indicator, but this is for banking and other things. This white line here, this is the horizontal, right? This is the baseline horizontal. The orange dot and the two orange lines here, they represent the aircraft, and these are the wings. So when the aircraft is pitched above horizontal to fly horizontally, as it has to be, to fly horizontally, an aircraft has to have the chord line of the wings pitched above horizontal. So during flight, these orange lines will be slightly above this white line. So you could say if this was 5 degrees pitch here, which it is shown to be, you would probably have these orange lines about maybe halfway or a bit over between this horizontal line here and this 5-degree line here. And that's where it would be for the majority of it would stay within that parameter while at cruising altitude all the time. So regardless of the length of the flight, that is, as long as the plane is at cruising altitude, the orange lines, as long as the plane is flying, basically, once it's not taking off or landing, it'll be between those two parameters that these orange wing lines here will be, because that's where it has to be. To fly in a horizontal fashion, the airplane has to have the chord line of the wings above horizontal. That's just the dynamics of flight.
I'm not sure why Brian bothered showing this. Yes, Brian, this is an attitude indicator. It doesn't tell you what kind of mood the airplane's in. It tells you whether you're pitched up or down, or whether you're banking right or left. You're talking about the little airplane in the window and how in cruise flight it would be somewhere between 0 degrees and 5 degrees up. Let me tell you something about an attitude indicator that you're not aware of. That little knob on the right that says pull the cage, you can also turn it. And when you turn it, it raises and lowers the little airplane in the window. That's so a pilot can remove parallax from what he's seeing. Now, different pilots like to see this thing different ways. I prefer to see it look just exactly like it does when I'm in level flight. But you really can't fly by reference to this thing. In fact, in visual conditions, we rarely ever even look at this thing. It's nice in instrument flight conditions because you can see at a glance what the airplane's doing, whether your nose up or down, whether the wings are banked or not. But for actual flight purposes, we've got other instrumentation. Now, you did mention an angle of attack. And yeah, there are angle of attack meters in aircraft. Some look something like this. All larger aircraft have it, and you're starting to see more of them in general aviation aircraft as well. But the mere fact that there is such a thing as an angle of attack meter should tell you that it's not the same thing as pitch angle. But while we're doing it, we may as well just run through some of the other primary flight instruments. If I want to maintain the pitch of the airplane, if I want to maintain level flight, I'm going to do it by reference to what? The altimeter. That's going to tell me if I'm climbing or descending. If I want to know if the wings are banked, all I need to do is look at the heading indicator. The airplane can't turn if the wings are level. If I really want to know how rapidly I'm turning, I look at the turn coordinator. This one's a 2-minute turn coordinator. If I put the wing of the little airplane on the white line, it tells me I'm doing a 360-degree turn in 2 minutes. That's called a standard rate turn. That's what ATC wants to see you do. And finally, when I want to know how rapidly I'm climbing or descending, I use the vertical speed indicator. I think I just covered 5 of the 6 most important instruments we use. The one I didn't show you is the airspeed indicator. It is pretty straightforward.
Okay, this here is, I'll just get rid of this thing here. I'll ignore it. So this is, it won't go away. This here is just showing the chord line and different ascending level flight and descending with the use of the chord line, or sorry, with the, it's showing the relationship between the chord line and the horizontal. So you can look at that yourselves, and I'm not going to go into it too much because the next 2 are more simplistic, and I want to show them. So
Brian didn't want to spend a lot of time on this diagram. I think maybe it had something to do with this, because when you look at that picture, clearly the pitch is well above horizontal, but the flight path is descending. In fact, you can descend with the nose high, or with the nose low, or with the nose level. I wonder if you would call these unofficial descents.
So angle of attack, right, flying slow, right? The angle of attack is high when you're flying slow, because the pilot has to have a high angle of attack to keep enough lift. When at cruise speed, the angle of attack is moderate, right? So these arrows here are horizontal.
No, Brian, those arrows say relative wind. Just because they drew it horizontally on the piece of paper doesn't mean that's the direction the airplane's traveling. The airplane could be traveling in that direction, or that direction. For that matter, the airplane could be traveling in any direction and still have a positive angle of attack. That's the way it works.
And this is the angle of attack, right? Cruise speed is moderate, slow speed is high, and high speed then will be a shallow angle of attack. We'll be talking about this is about 2 degrees above horizontal. So it will still be above horizontal, but it will be not as high above as at cruise speed or slow speed, as there isn't a necessity for it. And because the pilot is adding thrust, they must keep the nose down, because otherwise it will go up and into a possible stall. So this one is not as clear, but I'll try and show it anyway. I won't make it any bigger because it's hard to read it. So this shows here at 150 knots airspeed, there'll be a 3-degree angle of attack. At 100 knots, there will be an 8-degree angle of attack. At 80 knots, there will be a 12-degree angle of attack. And at 60 knots, there will be an 18-degree angle of attack.
Throttle to 65 knots. The hell's a knot?
So as you can see, the more speed, the more shallow the angle of attack is.
Brian just continues to confuse pitch angle and angle of attack and direction of flight with horizontal. So let's skip forward and let Brian think of a new way to mess this up.
What I have detailed so far in this presentation is the basic reality to how an aircraft's angle of attack works, what positive and negative lift is, and how lift is created or lost through the use of thrust and pitch. But we have a claim from some pilots that they are flying around the globe Earth with a radius of 3959 miles as an average. So if we test this claim against reality, we will see that in reality a pilot will not fly at cruising altitude with the chord line or nose of the aircraft pitched below horizontal, something that would be a necessity for a pilot that was to fly over a spherical surface.
Well, Brian has just made a claim, and Brian claims that an airplane has to decrease its pitch angle in order to follow the curvature of the Earth. Now that would obviously initiate a descent, and that presumes that the airplane had climbed above its level cruising altitude. After all, if you were already at the right altitude, you wouldn't want to initiate a descent, now would you? But for that to have occurred, either the air density had to change, the thrust had to change, the angle of attack had to change, or the airplane wasn't trimmed properly in the first place. Of course, none of that happened. But for fun, let's see if we can make Brian's idea work. First, we need to do a couple of things. We need to eliminate gravity, and we need to assume the atmospheric pressure is uniform. In other words, there is no pressure gradient. So if that were true, we'll just put a line in here that we call constant altitude. Now let's let our little airplane start in a position like that. And since we don't have gravity to contend with or a pressure gradient that's going to affect our lift, the airplane should just fly in a straight line, like that line. And it should do that until we reach a point, let's say right about there, at which time the pilot would initiate a descent. That would look like that. Now the airplane's flying along that straight line, and it will do that until it comes to that point. And the pilot once again initiates a descent, like that. And you just do that and stair-step yourself right around the curve. I suppose it would work, but obviously that's not what happens. In reality, we do have gravity, and in reality, the atmosphere has a pressure gradient. So there's our little airplane. We have an angle of attack based on the direction of travel. The center of gravity is there, and the center of lift is there. And as we talked about before, since the CG is in front of the center of lift, the airplane is going to try to pitch nose down, but we've got a tail that'll keep everything balanced for us. So our angle of attack is going to remain constant. Now let's put in our constant altitude, but this time that is a specific air density. Remember that lift is directly proportional to that air density. So if the airplane tries to climb, the air density is going to go down and the lift is going to go down. And the airplane is going to go down. And the reverse happens if you try to descend. Air density will increase, lift will increase, and the plane will climb. So we put our airplane in. And remember, this is constantly referenced to gravity. There's the gravity vector. And as we fly, that gravity vector is following us along. And we just simply stay at a constant altitude as long as we want to stay there.
And to prove this, I will show some pitch mathematics that are based on what a pilot would have to do if they were to fly over a globe Earth with a radius of 3959 miles as an average at cruising altitude, traveling at a constant 550 miles per hour and an airspeed that would be fairly common for a commercial airliner. Okay, I must say thanks to my friend Adam Meakin who helped me out with this because my mathematics doesn't be brilliant sometimes. Okay, at 550 miles per hour airspeed, a pilot flying over a globe Earth with an average radius of 3959 miles would have to be pitching down below horizontal minus 0.0025% of a degree every second. This doesn't seem like much, it seems like a tiny amount, but there's a huge problem here.
Well, there's a small problem. You've done something wrong. What you're trying to do is figure out an angular velocity. You're trying to figure out angle alpha per second. You didn't tell us exactly how you did it, but this is what I came up with. You took 550 miles per hour divided by 60 nautical miles per degree to get degrees per hour, and then divided that by 3,600 seconds in an hour and came up with 0.0025 degrees per second. The problem with that is this. You used miles per hour and nautical miles. Now, if you meant 550 knots, then the calculation is correct. If you actually did mean 550 miles per hour, it's 550 divided by 69 miles per degree divided by 3,600 seconds in an hour. And the answer would be 0.0022 degrees per second. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to point out the inconsistency because it confused me at first until I realized what you had done.
Firstly, aircraft don't fly with their pitch angle below horizontal while at cruising altitude ever.
And no one claims we do, Brian. That's a straw man you've constructed.
As the aircraft would be losing the necessary lift it needs to fly, and it would be officially in a descent then. So these two facts should be enough to sway anybody at this stage against the idea that aircraft are flying over a globe out. But as people can be very stupid and dogged, they will take the minus 0.0025% of a below horizontal pitch per second angle correction, something that will be a necessity to fly over a globe out with an airspeed of 550 miles per hour, and just write it off. Right? Because people don't want to live in reality. So they go, we'll just write that off.
That's not why we'll write it off, Brian. We'll write it off because it's like putting tomatoes in a fruit salad. It's just wrong. By the way, it's not percent of a degree, it's just degrees.
Right? But you can't just write that off. I'm going to show you why you can't. Not only would you not have any lift with your angle of attack pitch below zero, and you'll be heading in, and you're also in a descent towards the ground, but there's a bigger problem. But what they are not accounting for is the accumulation that this pitch correction would create. As a minus 0.0025% per second correction would result in a minus 0.15% per minute below horizontal correction, or a minus 9 degrees below horizontal pitch correction per hour.
Wait a minute, Brian. Now you've got the airplane ignoring the density gradient, ignoring the direction of gravity, and continuing to accumulate pitch changes until it flies itself into the ground. Brian, you're starting to make this guy look normal.
Remember, to fly over a globe out with an average radius of 3959 miles, then the pilot can never fly horizontally, as they must always have a below horizontal pitch. And to fly horizontally, in reality, they must fly with the nose of the aircraft above horizontal. They can't fly with the nose or the chord line below horizontal, as they won't have lift. And it'll be also a descent towards the ground. So it's complete and utter nonsense to think that they can fly and pitch down and fly and pitch down. They can't do that. And I'm going to show you why they're not doing it as well. Not that I don't think anyone with good faculty of mind won't need to know, but there's still people out there who will still be arguing at this point. Pilots will follow an altitude, which means that they will try to hold a constant even distance above the Earth's surface through the referencing of the outside air pressure. So to do this around a globe out would mean either a constant downward pitch below horizontal or constant sharp pitch corrections downwards throughout a flight. And this would mean that all passengers and crew would need to be seated and have their seatbelts strapped on.
This is what you need to have strapped on, Brian.
For the majority of the journey. But this does not happen, as the aircraft stays flying with its nose and chord line +3 to +5 degrees above horizontal at all times at cruising altitude. So what this means is pilots follow an altitude, but above a globe out, the altitude, right, would have to be constant, right? And so to fly around the globe out and follow an altitude would mean that you'd have to constantly be pitching down below horizontal. That's the only way you can do it. That is the geometry of a ball, or or a circle, you have to, you can't fly horizontally and stay at the same, let's say at the same, although parallel lines are straight, you won't stay anyway, let's say two curved parallel lines. You're trying to make a second curved parallel line with a parallel, sorry, a second curved line in parallel with a curved line underneath you by trying to follow an altitude around the globe Earth. So how are you going to do this and not pitch down below zero? It would be impossible.
Hey, Brian, have a look at this airplane doing an outside loop around an imaginary ball that's maybe 1,000 feet in diameter. Do you really think it's a problem to do one of those loops around a ball that's 8,000 miles in diameter? I don't think so.
It's a physics impossibility. You have to pitch down below zero, otherwise you won't be able to follow this altitude. So if they're flying around the globe Earth and following an altitude, then that means they have to be pitching down below zero, which would mean an accumulation of 9 degrees below zero pitch after an hour. And that's only 1 hour. But they don't do that. They fly with the nose and chord line above horizontal, 3 to 5 degrees at cruising altitude. That's what commercial airliners do. So this is nonsense. They can't follow an altitude and not pitch down. It's impossible. They just can't do that. Remember, pilots claiming to just follow an altitude is not proof for the claim that they are flying over a globe Earth, as they would have to do exactly the same thing if they were to fly over a flat Earth.
I agree, Brian. In terms of the mechanics of flying an airplane, the airplane doesn't know what shape the Earth is under it. All it knows is about the air that it's flying in. As long as gravity is straight down and you have the pressure gradient, you would not be able to tell the difference just from the mechanics of flying the airplane what the shape of the object is you're flying over the top of. When you go beyond that, there are some clues that you can look into, and I'll give you one of them. And anybody can do this. The next time you're on an airplane at sunrise or sunset, make sure you've got an app on your telephone that will show you where your eye level is. And then try to figure out how the sun can be several degrees below your eye level if the Earth is flat.
And any corrections being made for altitude in reality is due to weather, their direction, and the time of year, as they will be encountering weather systems and convection cells, things that will be constantly changing from place to place and season to season. So following an altitude is not a proof of a globe Earth. Where would you even get an altitude reading from on a globe Earth?
Where would you get an altitude reading on a globe Earth? From the altimeter, you silly goose. Brian's trying to invoke the flat Earth you can't have gas pressure without a container argument. Brian, did you forget to read the sign on your way in?
Anyway, so the point here is that like a lot of pilots will say, well, I just follow an altitude and that brings me around the globe. No, that's not how it works. Excuse me. My throat is dry from talking. So that's not how it works. You can't follow an altitude but not pitch down.
Well, it works exactly that way, Brian. The air density at any given altitude is pretty much constant. From the lift equation, we know that lift is directly proportional to the density of the air. And at any given altitude, that density doesn't change by much, except for maybe barometric pressure variations. But those are usually pretty minor. So if our airspeed doesn't change, because the angle of attack didn't change, then our altitude above mean sea level remains constant. And it simply looks like this. Now, what's wrong with that, Brian? Now, Brian's got at least another 10 minutes worth of derp, and I don't think we need to hear all of it. So I think we'll call it quits about here. But Brian, you really need to do something about this, buddy. You're going to get yourself stuck in that position. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget those little buttons down there. Tickle the little bell if you want notifications. Shout out to the members, the patrons, and PayPals for everything you guys do. And I will see you on the next one.